Okay, so good morning, everybody. Good afternoon or good evening, and thank you for coming to this webinar session brought to you by BELTA and with the support of Heike Philp of Let's Talk Online. My name is James Taylor, and I am the president of BELTA, the Belgian English Language Teachers Association. Our aim is to encourage professional development through bringing together English language professionals in Belgium to discuss the things that matter to them, whether it's face-to-face, like at our recent BELTA Day, or online, like today. We also want to connect Belgian teachers to the worldwide of ELT, and that's why we offer this webinar series, where we can bring our members together with teachers from around the world to watch presentations from international speakers. So hello to all of our members and to those of you joining us from outside Belgium. In this month's webinar, we are joined by Michael Griffin, who will be speaking about ways of collecting feedback from your learners. Now, let me tell you something about Michael. Michael has been teaching for around 15 years, mostly in Northeast Asia and on the internet. He's currently based in Seoul, where he teaches mostly English at Chong'an University. Currently, teacher training and development is both a hobby and a passion for Michael, something I know about. And Mike is also involved with I think this is how you say it, KELT chat. Is that how you say it, Mike?
I've never said it. Probably Kelt Chat. Kelt Chat.
Kelt. Yeah, I wasn't sure. Okay, let's go with Kelt chat. ITDI and the new school MA TESOL program. He's also the writer of a very popular blog called ELT Rants, Reviews and Reflections. And though he has presented more than 30 times in the last 5 years, Michael has never done a webinar before. So we're very excited he'll be doing his first one with BELTA. I'm very happy to introduce Michael Griffin, whether he's ranting, reviewing or reflecting. I'm sure it's going to be fascinating. Okay, Mike, over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, James. I appreciate the nice welcome. Happy Mother's Day to everyone as well. So I'll get started here. Here's the title here, all about feedback from students. And this is what I'll be talking about. So let's get started with it. Here's my first slide. Yeah. What does this slide have to do with anything? Okay. Well, this is interesting. So no, I'm just joking. This slide has something to do with something. So I might forget to explain this slide later, so I need you guys to help me out and remember and explain this and ask me to explain this slide just in case I happen to forget. I probably won't forget, but just in case I forget, I need somebody to remind me later to explain it. Throughout this presentation, you can please feel free to ask questions in the question box. I'll also try my best to keep my eye on the chat room as well. I'm going to have time for questions at the end, so you can ask your questions during the middle. Hopefully I'll answer them, maybe not. And then I'll definitely give time for questions at the end as well. So that's how we'll proceed with that. And again, please remind me of this lovely toilet if I don't happen to remember. Okay, so speaking of forgetting, I don't want to forget my manners here. I would like to make some thanks and some apologies. So thanks first to the good people at BELTA, especially Vicky Loris, Whoop, and John Arnold and James Taylor, especially James for that lovely introduction and for waking up so early in Costa Rica as well. It's very nice and I appreciate it. So thank you to those guys. And also I'd like to give some special thanks, and they're both in the room, which is very nice, to Anna Loseva and Kevin Stein. They were my co-presenters last year at JALT in Japan, and we talked about feedback, and I borrowed some of our ideas there. I think I might have gotten permission from those wonderful people, but I'm not quite sure. and they're blushing now, which is nice. So thank you, Kevin and Anna, for being here, and also for your help long time ago when we prepared for JALT, because a lot of the ideas are similar here. My other thanks are for all of you for being here. I think it's really lovely and nice, especially, you know, taking time out of your weekend, even Mother's Day, and nice to see people from all over the world. It was also quite nice to see people tweeting about this event coming on, so thank you to those people for that as well. So that's, hopefully I didn't forget any of my thanks there. And now I move on to my apologies. My first apology is that not all the slides make sense. They sort of made a little bit of sense to me at some point in time, but they don't always make tons of sense. And again, the toilet slide does make sense, I promise. So that's my first apology. My other apology is about my voice not being quite as sexy as some people might have expected. So I apologize. I apologize for that as well. Other apologies, going down my list here, my long list of apologies. This presentation is not super academic. It's a little bit more on the practitioner side of things. So it's not super academic. At the same time, it's not super practical, as in here are 10 things you can do on Monday. So it's sort of right in the middle between those things, and maybe is in the sweet spot of neither academic nor practical, which could be problematic. But ideally, it's good in that way, in that it's just a chance to give you some things to think about, and maybe give you a chance to articulate your beliefs and think about what collecting feedback from students means to you in your context and what it can mean. Another apology, for those of you familiar with my blog, you might be expecting some swearing. I'm sorry, there's not going to be any of that, barring any accidents or anything here, so I apologize for that. Speaking of my blog, there's some repetition, some stories and things that I've mentioned before on my blog. Hopefully it won't be too boring. So there's I'll repeat some famous tales of feedback, not so famous, but some tales of feedback I've talked about already on my blog. I feel kind of like a person with just always forgets the stories and who they told them to and just keeps repeating the stories, but hopefully they'll add some value to your thoughts about feedback from students. The other thing, in the flow of the webinar here, I'm going to be a little bit maybe challenging of beliefs, or a little bit, I don't know, cynical, or a little bit negative, or provocative, or sort of questioning the usual things. Excuse me. Sorry, Kevin. Questioning the usual things that we think about when we think about feedback. Hopefully that's a good thing and not necessarily so much of an apology. Now I'll talk a little bit more in detail about what's coming up. Now that my apologies are done, I feel I've gotten those out there. I feel relieved and refreshed and ready to go. So this is what's coming. I'll let you read it. And as you can see, there's quite a few why questions there at the start. And then again, as I mentioned, beliefs about feedback. Ways of collecting feedback. I'm going to talk about 5 different ways that I've most experimented with and I think are useful. I can't promise they're all new for everyone, but hopefully they'll give you something to think about, and they'll be at least a little bit useful. And then also what we do with feedback when we get it. And then also I have, you can see there, second to last, Mike says. This is sort of me stating some of my beliefs about student feedback. And these beliefs are what I have right now today, and maybe subject to change, and maybe a little bit provocative as well. So that's what's coming. And let's get started with the why are we here question. So it's a little different on a webinar when you make a very funny joke like I just did and you can't hear any laughter. Thank you, Deborah. Moving along here. Question is, why are we here? What are you hoping for? What are you expecting to get from this remaining 50 minutes of this webinar? I'd love it. Thank you, Divya. I'd love it if you could add your thoughts here. Why are you here? What are you hoping for in that in the box there? To discuss feedback. Good, Hada, we're in the right place for that. New ways of taking and exploiting feedback, good. Thank you, Hannah. Nice to be seen. Almost in person. She wants to hear my thoughts and I'm reflecting on feedback. The answers from Deborah and Amelie. Thank you. Pretty much all the above from above. Okay. Looked like Olia was typing something. So I'll thank you guys. Thank you for that. Oh, yeah, that's excellent. To work up the guts to actually start asking for feedback. I love it. That's maybe this will help with that. So what I'd like to talk about next is why I'm here and really why did I want to talk about this topic. So as James said, I've done some work on training courses, mostly with public school Korean teachers. And also, I've taken training courses and I've worked with teachers a lot. And this simple idea, what we might think of as simple, about collecting feedback, I don't remember covering this on the CELTA when I took the CELTA long time ago. Maybe I missed it, but that's also telling. So I'm happy to be corrected. I'm happy to have people say, no, Mike, it's everywhere. You just were sleeping that day. But to my mind, this idea of collecting feedback from students is sort of missing in a lot of training courses. And in my experience on training courses that I've run, it's also missing. And it's sort of just a little bit off to the side. And we do it, we collect feedback and we work on it. And sort of maybe we give a model of it, but we don't really dive in there and talk about it. So that's one thing I wanted to, that's one reason I wanted to address this. Another reason, Q mentioned reflection and reflective practice there. One thing for me, actually I started with a couple of other folks, I started the reflective practice SIG special interest group in Korea a couple years back. And whenever the question came up, we have these group meetings and the question would come up, how do you reflect? And very frequently, the answer was, I collect feedback from students. That's how I reflect. And that sounds totally fine to me, but I didn't know what that meant. I didn't see the connection. I'm sorry, Q, maybe I'm not going to tell you the connection here as I see it. I couldn't see the connection. So people just said, I collect feedback. That means I reflect. And I was always kind of wondering, well, what does that mean? What's the process there? First of all, how do you collect feedback? What do you do? What's the process of collecting it? But also, what's the process in your mind as you are thinking about this feedback, as you're reflecting on it? So it's been on my mind for a couple of years now. I also mentioned JALT 2013. I had the pleasure of presenting with Kevin and Anna, and it was a really interesting process of coming together. How do we collect feedback? What does it mean for us? And we got a nice group discussion going there at JALT. So I wanted to kind of continue with that momentum. And at the same time, people seemed interested. People said, oh, that's an interesting topic. I haven't really heard too many presentations on that and this kind of thing. So those were some of the reasons. The other reason is I had some what I thought were interesting experiences with feedback. In my previous job, maybe now this is 2 jobs ago, I worked at a language school attached to a university here in Seoul. And at this place, the student evaluations of teachers, these kind of bubble sheets at end of the term, 1 out of 5. How good was the teacher about this thing? You know the type I mean, I guess. Um, these evaluations were so incredibly important at that place. Um, the, in fact, they were so important that teachers were getting fired if they didn't have a high enough number. And in fact, the usual system was to hire 5 people and let go at least 1 or 2 each term of the 5 new hirees who were the lowest of the scores there. And the scores were again out of 5, and you had maybe 20 questions. So if you had an average, under 80, you were really in trouble. So again, all the questions are out of 5. Students were giving 4 out of 5, 4 out of 5, 4 out of 5, and then a couple 3 out of 5s. You could be in danger of losing your job. And now these questions, I don't know where they came from. They didn't really reflect my goals as a teacher. They didn't really reflect what seemed to be going on in classes. They were just this thing that happened at the end of the term that determined people's livelihoods. And that just seemed crazy to me at the time, and still now. Students didn't even know how important they were, because teachers felt a little bit uncomfortable to tell them, hey, this is really important. You know, I'm going to lose my job if I get less than, if I average 3.5 out of 5, I might lose my job. So it was this like unknown thing for students. They were just filling this thing out. They didn't really realize the power that they had. And teachers, you know, we didn't know where these questions came from. We didn't know what they meant. And maybe we could have studied them better, especially me, maybe, I don't know. So the other thing about this that's a little bit sidebar to this whole conversation is that the teachers who did the best on those evals got benefits like bonuses and better schedules next time, and in fact better classes. By better classes, I mean classes more likely to score highly. Like listening was not a good class to teach, but grammar was, for example, in terms of the scores. So it was just a mess, and I just couldn't believe that this is how it was working. One particular time, I made a really interesting choice. I bought pizza or drinks or had a party with my class, totally unrelated to the evaluations. Basically, I made some bet with them and they won, and so I said, I'll buy sodas for everybody. Little did I know that the evaluations were the next day. And so there I was marching into class with all these drinks and everything. And all my co-teachers were looking at me like, what is he doing? He's rigging the system. So that was one little experience with that. Another one with those evaluations, the only thing that I could see on all those questions, the only thing I could see that was really objective was about being on time. All the other ones were like, teacher did this well, and this was good, and I like this, and all that. But there was one question, I think it was question number 3. Question number 3 was like, the teacher starts class on time. And so one particular term I said, okay, I'm doing this. I'm gonna start class on time every time. I'm gonna be there 5 minutes early, and I'm gonna get a perfect score on this. I don't think you need me to tell you that I didn't get a perfect score. I'm not crying about it 6 years later now, but just to give a little hint about how these systems can be not so effective. So that was one of my previous jobs. And then the next year I worked in a training center working with Korean teachers, and I had some really nice experiences with feedback that opened my eyes a little bit to how it can be productive. And part of those experiences were that after collecting feedback, we made this big spreadsheet and had all their comments that they said, and we sat down and very calmly and, to my mind, professionally talked about the feedback we'd received and went over point by point and said, okay, that's a very fair point. I see where you're coming from, but you know, 3 people said the opposite, so we can't do that. And we said, okay, that's a really good point and we like it, but time considerations. And it just turned into this really, to my mind, nice conversation and really opened the floodgates for exchange. So that was one thing. And then these Korean teachers that I was working with, they seemed very impressed by us sitting down and talking about the feedback. And they also were happy we made changes based on what they said. But at the same time, they said, yeah, I really like this as a learner. I really like this as a course participant. But as a teacher, I'm not sure I can. I'm maybe not brave enough. Um, Maybe students will judge me or other teachers will judge me. I'm not ready to do it. So it was really interesting to know they loved it as participants, but as teachers, they were kind of iffy about the whole thing. So that really got me thinking as well. So my next focus here is kind of about reasons why we might want to collect feedback. So this is pushing it to you. Why some reasons to collect feedback from students? Why do teachers collect feedback from students? Please write in the chat room. Give me a couple minutes. Hannah says to adjust our future teaching. Q says to let them know you care about their opinions. So to get a feeling of how we're doing, kind of take the pulse of things. I think it's interesting Hannah talks about future teaching because maybe with this class, maybe it's already, the time has passed and things like that. I didn't miss you, Annie. Annie said, it's one thing to know a technique and another to try to administer it. Sure. Maybe related to my previous point. These are really interesting points. Kevin says to model how to listen and negotiate. Wow. To wake up from our dream. So actually, folks, your answers are seemingly much better than mine. Good point from Deborah. Reflect on planning, but don't know what students expect. David's talking about another perspective, and I think that's a really important point. It's very easy as teachers to just get in our own mind and think, oh, that was great, that was wonderful, that was terrible, but just getting another angle on things can really open our eyes up. So here's some reasons. Whoops, I went backwards. Here's some reasons teachers might collect feedback, and maybe these are not the best answers. I think your answers are far better. Because I have to, because that's what teachers do, because it's useful. And I think again, we really want to think about what does that mean, useful? When we say useful, what are we talking about? What is useful? Teachers do, yeah, it's our job as teachers. That's what we do. These are things we do. We take roll, we teach stuff, we give tests, we get feedback. This is what we do. And yeah, Roy, I like your point about it's a requirement for an institution and good practice as well. So these are some reasons why, and again, I urge you to check in the chat box. Ignore my slide there. I think, again, your answers are much better. So what about reasons not to collect feedback? We've already talked about kind of the nerve or the shyness factor or, emotional aspects. What are some reasons not to collect feedback? Sorry if I'm racing a little bit here. Next question for the chat room again. Some reasons teachers might not want to collect feedback. Teacher game, yeah, students might be coming from a very different perspective, sure. The answers can be biased, might not be so valid. Deborah says sometimes they don't know what to say, a blank paper, everything's perfect, teacher, thanks. Well, yeah, and the possibility for teachers, or students rather, feeling upset if feedback is not followed up on. Sure, you asked me for it, and now you're not making actions. James, I think, hits the real, again, all these answers are great. James really hits the nail on the head here. As teachers, we can just get so hung up on the one piece of bad feedback that comes in, ignoring all the rest, and pulling our hair out and changing our teaching style about one comment out of 20. And I think that's a really great point that we need to think about. And again, yeah, good point from Hada. It's alien, it's new, it's different. Teachers in this culture, that culture, whatever, they don't usually do it. So suddenly we're trying to do it, and there's something weird about it. And here's some reasons that I came up with why not to collect feedback, and kind of matching your answers here with a few new ones. Yes, I had a lot more reasons not to. Some of them I think are valid. Some of them maybe not so valid. I don't know. So yeah, I think it is interesting the reasons for and the reasons why not. And I think what I want to talk about really briefly here, my school already collects feedback. I think we need to consider the purpose the school collects the feedback, and maybe that's not the same purpose that we have. I talked already about feedback evaluations being a mechanism for firing 20% of teachers. That's a little bit different than developmental feedback for the teacher to help themselves teach teach the same class differently, more effectively, better, whatever, or teach again next year another class. So I think that idea about my school collecting feedback already maybe was worth thinking about a little bit more. So I'm gonna move on here to some beliefs about feedback. And what I have 10 statements here, and I'd like to explore our beliefs on these. And so what it's going to be one statement comes up, and all you need to do is hit T or F in the box to show you think that's true or you think that's false. And then I'll talk a little bit more about it. This is another little bit of an apology here, because it's a little bit not fair, because the questions are not always so cut and dry. So I'm going to ask you to say T or F with the knowledge that, of course, it's not that simple and it's not that easy always. So that I apologize for that. And you can also think about, in general, you can also think about your context, because the questions, again, might be a little bit tricky. So the statements are coming up, the belief comes on the screen, and you just type in T or F. True or false is fine as well. And then I'll give my response, which is not really trying to refute yours, but just giving my brief opinion on things. And you're very welcome to disagree. Again, this is the part I apologize for being maybe a little bit provocative and disagreeable and cynical and all these other things. Here's the quiz. Feedback should be anonymous. Please type T or F. Wow, look at that. It's about 50-50 there. Wow, this is still a good one. Q, T or F, tricky. Here's my answer. No, I mean, I think it really is both. And as we can see here with the wide variety of answers there, well, I mean, discrepancy in answers there. Personally, I like, these days I'm in a time when I want to know who said it. I really want to know who said it, because then it helps me think, okay, well, that person never came to class. That person, okay, that makes sense within all the things that I know about that person. And yeah, I mean, I understand that we might be worried we can't get the same feedback because students will be worried about being honest and be worried about repercussions and all these kind of things. But at the same time, for me, I find the feedback incredibly more useful when I know who said it. And also, I think when people, and again, it depends on age, depends on context, as you guys are all saying. Um, when students put their name on it, maybe they're more likely to not be out to get you and say bad things for the sake of saying bad things. It's a little bit more human of an enterprise. And again, it definitely depends on the context in the class, but I feel like as a field, we're really stuck on it should always be anonymous. It should always be anonymous. And I'm thinking maybe sometimes there's good reason for it not to be. Yes, exactly, taking responsibility. And moving along here, here comes our second statement. Who's right to your eye? Not feelings. And again, we can see why I'm a little bit tricky here with my questions. So feelings, someone said not feelings. I think oftentimes feedback just turns into tell me 3 activities you liked and 3 activities you didn't like. And I think that's a good start, and I think that's useful. That tells us some things, that gives us a view. But at the same time, I'm not sure that just activities tells us everything. Maybe students have some area, some genre, some kind of thing they really want to practice, and just by knowing how they liked certain activities, how they didn't like certain activities, we're not going to get there. And again, the type, as people are saying, types of students and all these kind of things. So I think it's nice to get feedback on specific activities, but I think there's probably more to it if we really want to get the most useful feedback, from my view. I think we probably want to move beyond just activities themselves and think about other things. And we're moving on to number 3. I'll go forward, backwards before I go forward. And here's number 3. Hello, Russ. Hello, everyone. And we're just writing TRF here. Only. So much F here. I'm just going to zoom right through this one. Yeah, I agree with all you guys, and I think that's right on point with what I'm thinking. And also, I'd say good luck. Good luck getting feedback only about the teaching skills, and that's a tough one. Zooming along here to the 4th one, we're back in our adding TRF. So false. So much F. Here's 4. A lot of truths there, a lot of T's, okay. I see, depending on the interval, okay. I wonder if you guys are saying that there's the interval could be too many, maybe? For me, this one, the reason I included this one, it seems that oftentimes feedback comes in the middle and the end, and that's it. And I'm kind of calling into question maybe more, maybe more is better. That's my point there, simply. And with number 5 here, your job, TRF. lot of F's, depends on the design. This is actually quite a hot topic in the news lately. There's an article in The Guardian and an article in Slate about how absolutely useless they are for, especially at college level. So I have links to those at the end that you can check out. The article from Slate is particularly interesting. My answer here, yeah, I think they're useful for what they're for, but maybe they're not useful for us as teachers to develop our practice. It's just one kind of information out there. And again, of course, it depends. It's just one glimpse, one simple glimpse. Again, it does depend on how it's designed, surely. So moving on here. Depends on the level, depends on the context, lower levels, age. Mike, I see you're in the UK. I think it might be tough with many languages. So this to me speaks to the point before about my student's level is too low. Okay, if that's really true, I think there's things you can do, including translation, but also I think, you know, you can do pictures, you can do smiley faces, you can do boxes, you can do numbers, you know, all these kind of things. Lots of people are saying it's bilingual where they were. You need the info, right? Here comes number 7. See lots of F's there. And again, I think it depends on implementation, and it can be learning, and it can be part of the learning process. So I think this sort of weaselly word here with real learning takes class time away from real learning. And I don't think it has to take that long, which is maybe a separate point. But yeah, the answer I was hoping for was false here, because it can be incorporated into the class. Okay, Hedda, fair enough. She says her school has extensive questionnaires that take up valuable time. The key point is what you want to know, right? Rather than the time. Okay, nice point there as well. And we're moving on here to number 8. Russ, feel free to say more about what's problematic. But the point I was hoping to make here, the point I was hoping to illustrate here is that there can be this tendency to only think about the bad stuff, the wrong stuff, the things we just need to change immediately. And then by doing that without knowing what other factors, we can totally transform the class and try something new that students don't like and replace the things they like, and then we're in a bad situation. So it's kind of a simple point, but I also think it's useful to collect and maybe my wording is a little strange there, but to collect positive things, to collect examples of things to keep doing. It's good to know what we're getting right. Right, so how much we like the teacher depends. Sure. That's problematic for sure. And I've jumped ahead to number 9 here. And the wording here is a little strange. Type true if you think students are bad at feedback. False if you think students are usually good at feedback. Feedback to the teacher from the student. Students are usually good at this, at giving good feedback, useful feedback. I think Hannah, who's Hannah? Was it Hannah? Yeah, Hannah. If they were trained, yes, I think this is the case. This is the case. I think it's not easy. I think as teachers, we know giving useful feedback is hard. I don't understand how we can expect students to do it suddenly without training, without practice, without knowing what's effective, without all these things. It just seems crazy to me to think suddenly students would be in a position to do that. I was talking on Twitter yesterday with Chris Wilson in Spain, and he said, oh, the best feedback I ever got was when I did a whole lesson on the language of feedback, and I talked about what made good feedback as a language lesson, and then the final thing was collecting feedback. And I thought that was really useful and interesting, an interesting point, and something worth thinking about. I think feedback on feedback, dealing with feedback, building up to let students know, A, that we value it, and B, what is useful for us, I think is a really important thing that's often underlooked. The culture of complaint, sure, it's a chance to complain often, rather than a chance to share specific things that they would like, or something like this. And finally, move to number 10 here. Yeah, how exactly would we know? I mean, that one, I've heard that kind of belief stated, but for me, it's a tough one. It's a tough one to believe. So thank you for your time on these. I hope they weren't I hope they weren't too easy, and I hope they weren't too tricky or silly. So here's the whole list here, and I think your beliefs on these will impact how you collect feedback and what you think about collecting feedback. This is where you can snap a photo and save it for later. This is a lovely picture from James. It's not totally related to this, but you can make your own metaphor now, as you wish. Here are some things that we're hinting at here: contextual factors, age, literacy, general English, how long the course is, where it is, the type of group, our goals, student goals, and so many more things. So these are things we'll consider as we decide A, to collect feedback, B, what kind of feedback, all these kind of things. And I'd like to very briefly, in about 5 minutes or so, talk about 5 ways to collect feedback that I've been doing lately. The first one is check-ins, and what I mean by that is just a personal chat with a student one at a time. I give some questions beforehand, basically the goals that you told me a long time ago. That's a little hint as well, is collect goals at the beginning, but I'm guessing many people do that already. And sit down and have a 10-15 minute chat with students, and it's been really helpful and effective for me. I think it also builds rapport and helps me get to know the students. But I give them some time to think about some questions beforehand, and then sit down and talk. And what happened recently was I had a bunch of suggestions from students, and some of them I thought were really on target and were like, oh my gosh, how did I forget that? And some of them were like, oh, you know, I think we had a little miscommunication here. That's actually not this class. That's another class. There's another class that does that, and we're not doing this here because we have that other class. So, you know, sorry, not sorry. And so that's one way that I like. And again, I think it helps to give them the questions beforehand and give them some time to think and let them know that it's important and valued. Tight schedules, it's tough. I think what I had last time was I had everyone else doing some project where I could just pull people out for 10 minutes. Second way that I've used, and I talked about this in more detail on my blog, and there's a link to a nice explanation of this as well. What I do, I give 3 colored cards to students. One color means keep doing this. I like this. This is the thing you're doing, and I like this, and please keep doing this. Another is please stop doing this. And a third is please consider doing. So they're sharing things that they want the teacher to keep doing, things they want the teacher to stop doing, and things they want the teacher to consider doing. When I first learned this activity, I learned it with like red for stop, green for go, and orange for consider, but that's a little confusing for my simple brain. I don't like that. I use purple and other colors. Maybe the BELTA colors would be good. But so that's a really nice one. And what I found is that it gets specific things that the teacher is doing, rather than, oh, Mike, your voice is really sexy and all this kind of thing, you know. So that's one way. And then again, I get the cards, collect them all, and make try and make reasonable decisions. Wow, so many people want me to keep doing this. Yay, I'll keep doing that. 7 people suggested this one. Well, even though I hadn't thought of it, and I don't even think it's a great idea, maybe I'll do it. I use the colored cards during class. Yeah, I hand them out at one class, and no, this is like a specific feedback collection activity just for that. The point is just to collect feedback. Third way, exit tickets. I think this is pretty popular. I'm guessing everybody knows this one. One thing you learned today, 3 questions you have today, 3 things you learned today, 2 things you're not sure about, one thing you want to know more about, all these kind of things on a little piece of paper that you have to do before you leave the room. I'm guessing many people are familiar with this. And again, I think you can organize it how you wish for the questions that you want to know. You want to know what's confusing, you want to know what was learned, you want to know how they like that one thing. There's a bunch of things there. And that's a great point sorry, my pronunciation's bad. They can be regular, they can help students get thinking. Exit tickets, yeah, so you give students a little piece of paper and you say, please write 3 things you learned today. And then as they depart, they hand them to you. And yeah, it becomes a habit, and it doesn't take all that long. I discovered that recently when I did that with one class I hadn't done it with before, and it took forever, it took ages. And I was thinking, wow, this doesn't take long with the other class. And then I thought, well, Mike, because this is the first time and they don't know what you're expecting. You could do it at the end of every class. It doesn't have to be the end of every class. I do it maybe half the time with one particular group, something like that, but definitely it could be. Another idea, very fancifully named technological collection methods. Here I mean surveys online. Here in Korea, mostly everybody has a smartphone. Everybody has a smartphone. So I've actually never done it, but you could set up feedback that way to get students to do that. So Google Docs is also good, SurveyMonkey, all these kind of things, whether it's on the day or for a longer period of time. High school students don't have cell phones in class, maybe. So number 4 is a sort of vague and broad category, but there's lots of ways out there to do that, and maybe that you can push it outside of class time if you're worried about class time taking up too much class time. And this is an interesting one, is to kind of ask students to create a metaphor of this particular class today. Today's class was like blah blah blah, a walk through the park. Today's class was like blah, blah, blah. I almost swore there, so I'm not going to swear. And also, draw a picture that represents today's class. And this is a little bit of a different angle on it. It might not be exactly the same kind of information that you get. It might not be the same kind of information that you get, but it can give you a glimpse, and maybe a different glimpse, onto what's happening in class and what students are thinking. So those are just 5 ways that I'm thinking. Anna mentioned the lino wall. That's a nice way. Weather forecast, same kind of thing. Yeah, it was cloudy in the middle and sunny at the end, and that kind of thing. That's, again, a nice way to collect feedback. What can we do with the results? I don't know. Something? Nothing? Maybe forget it. Maybe make changes. Address it. I personally like to sit down and chart up. If I've collected a lot, chart it up and share it with students. I think this is really useful because it helps students see how many people agree with them. Like, you're the only person requesting that. I'm really sorry. We can't do that. So I'd like to very, 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 very briefly share some quick thoughts here, and then I'll move on to official question time. I hope I've been answering questions mostly throughout. This is an excellent slide. But here's my quick take on some ideas with feedback. Previous experiences matter. Like, maybe they've never done it before, or maybe they've done it before and they just think it's nonsense. Teachers didn't respond, so we have to kind of build up that trust if we're going to do it. As James says, you can type questions into the box there. And again, feedback can be more useful if students know what it's for. The way we collect it matters. Talked about anonymous already. And again, activities, fine, but maybe there's more. Maybe we want to know more than just about activities. They should know what it's for, sure. And all these points here on this second slide here of my kind of culmination thoughts here, it can raise awareness, it can start conversations, it can build trust and awareness. And I think these are really important, even if we don't make any changes. If we just sit down and say, oh yeah, I think that's a really good point. I respect your opinion. We can't do that, Which one's the 4th one? Oh, student feedback can aid the reflective process for the teacher. Basically, it's another zone of information, another angle on things. We have just our own perceptions of what we thought had in class. Maybe we observe, maybe we have an observer, but student feedback is just another look into what's happening in class. That's really all I have to say, Q. I'm sorry to disappoint you on that. And then the final point, too little, too late. I think this is the case of when we collect feedback halfway through, and students are just wondering why this thing is happening that they dislike or hate or don't understand. I think maybe pushing that a little bit earlier can be helpful. And then here's my final round of thoughts. It can be for this time, it can be for next time, it can help our decision making. It doesn't come easy. Students need to be trained, they need practice, they need to know what we're looking for if we want to make it valuable. Student feedback can be like a pressure valve. I'm jumping, I made a mistake. I'll go back. Here's the toilet again. I think the thing about the toilet is, I heard this story a long time ago. One language school in Spain, they made sure that their toilets were really, really dirty all the time and a big mess and just disgusting, horrible toilets at the language school. Why did they do this? They did this because they wanted to give students something to complain about. Students are going to complain about something, so why not make it the toilet? So I think collecting feedback is a nice chance to kind of let students air out some of their thoughts, whether it's about toilets or not. And then the final points there, I think, it's not about the final point there. It's not about us as humans. And I think we take things personally a lot and say, oh, I'm a bad person, or I really goofed, or I really made these big mistakes. But it doesn't have to be like that. So those are really my final points. I hope I didn't go too quickly there at the end. Draw their attention to hide real problems. Yes, exactly. So this is the celebratory picture here before we go to questions briefly. Another lovely picture from James. James. And I hope, as I look at my clock, I've got 3 more minutes here. I hope I didn't erase too much, and I apologize for that if I did. Questions can go in the box, and I'll do my best to answer them. How much weight should feedback from students be given? I don't want to say none. I mean, because we have to have some basis for hiring, don't we? I mean, I don't know what it is, but I think in the previous school that I worked at, it was everything, and I don't think that was appropriate. Well, so maybe, thank you, James, for switching the slides to the questions. I hope I answered your question, Russ, the best I can. Roya says, how can we decide on useful contents and questions? Well, I mean, I think it depends on really what do we want to know. I'm not sure, what's the class about? What are we worried about as teachers? What are we trying that's different this time around? All sorts of things. I'm sorry, my answer is not very good. Russ wants to know about cultural differences. I think in Korea that it's not normal. I mean, in a public, as I was mentioning earlier with public school teachers, they said, we don't collect feedback. We don't do it. We might lose face and this kind of thing. But I think once you do it and you emphasize how it can be used and how you're using it and how you value it, and you take steps to show that even minor changes are being made, I think it's not so problematic in Korea. Kevin asks, do you let students reply to other students' feedback, like a feedback cage match? I have done that actually, Kevin. I shared all the feedback along the wall, all the things that I heard, and I let students kind of add graffiti to it. It wasn't quite a cage match, but it was along those lines. James asked about advice for dealing with the irrational side. I don't have any great advice except just realize that that's normal to get worked up about it, and know that that's what we tend to do, and then make your decisions, realize that it's coming from a place, and do your best to move on. I mean, I've gotten really burned up about feedback in the past that I thought was really not fair or didn't properly represent what I was about or all these kinds of things. Um, but at some point you just got to get over it. And I think by making small changes, by trying to address things without really calling your character or your person into question, I think is the key. Eileen's asking about draw the line between what students like and is effective. Can I train students to measure what's effective for learning? I think so. I think we can. I think I think we can help students um, by matching it to their goals and matching it to the targets of the class. I think we can help students kind of get more accurate on this distinction between what I like and what's helpful and effective. I think so. I don't think it's easy, and I think the inclination is what I like or the teacher I like. But I think it's not. I think it's not. It's not impossible. Wow, James, you're just cutting through the questions as they come up. That's beautiful. Hannah says, "What's worse, ignoring feedback or not taking feedback at all?" Um, I don't know. Ignoring. What does ignoring mean? Just throwing it in the bin, or um, and again, not taking feedback at all is an option if you don't value it and you have other reasons not to take it. I don't think that's a terrible thing. Yeah, I think I mean, I don't think it's an absolute must thing. I think it can be useful. I found it useful, but certain contexts, certain reasons, I wouldn't say it's a must. And ignoring, maybe students are used to that as well. Maybe that's as you say, that's often happens. So I don't think it's ideal. I'm thinking as a student, I wouldn't be that happy to spend my time writing a thing and then it never gets addressed. So
Okay,
looks
Mike.
like
I
the
think
questions have dried up there. I hope I didn't
yeah,
let
I
you
think
speak too quickly there.
no, not at all. I think you've tackled everything. If anyone's got any last minute questions, now's the time to type them in. Okay.
And I apologize again if my answers, your questions are very good. I think it really does depend a lot, doesn't it?
Yes, I think we understand this is a very context dependent situation. So definitely. Um, okay, well, I just want to say the chat today as well was particularly fantastic. I thought it was a really interesting conversation happening there, Mike. So I suggest if you want to go back and have a look at that, I would recommend it in case you missed anything. Um, okay, so I'd like to thank you for coming to this BELTA webinar and of course Sir Michael for that terrific presentation. If you'd like to know more about BELTA, remember to visit our website, beltabelgium.com, our Facebook and Twitter pages. And remember, we have two more webinars this month with the wonderful, in the next month, I should say, with the wonderful Malou Schimarelli on June 1st and the fantastic Christina Roboco Bordas a week later on June the 8th. Thanks for coming, everyone. Thanks for your fantastic participation, and we'll
That was
see you
great. Thank
next
you
month.
guys so much.